Thank you for mentioning the Republicans for Environmental Protection. I'm a newly elected board member. Could you speak, Carl Sagan wrote about the nuclear winter. Could you speak about the dangers of engineering climate?
Well, the biggest danger
is we're engineering climate right now, of course, with our adding carbon dioxide. And the rational way to deal with that is to reduce that forcing. So those things which can reverse the growth of CO2, I think, make sense. And in a sense, they are geoengineering, replanting forests on marginal lands and improving our agricultural practices so that the soils retain more carbon. Those in a sense are soft geoengineering, but they're just trying to reverse the problems that we're causing. I don't think the ideas of trying to reflect sunlight by putting up aerosols or reflecting silver particles or something is a solution, because that wouldn't, for example, that won't solve ocean acidification. We really have to deal with the fossil fuel source. We either have to leave it in the ground or else capture the CO2 and put it back in the ground. But as soon as you do the calculations on how expensive that would be, you're talking about tens of trillions of dollars to get a relatively small fraction of the CO2 back out of the atmosphere. So it makes more sense just to leave these dirty fuels in the ground, especially because they're finite anyhow. At most, oil will last several more decades, and coal maybe a little bit longer, but you're going to have to find energies, clean energies anyhow, so you've got to put the incentive so that we do it sooner before we cause the disaster.
Hey, this is Mark. Yeah. I really thought it was interesting, the perspective that these changes don't have to start here. They can start in China. I mean, whether that's like happening yet or not, I don't know. But I was curious, you said you wrote an article with a call for Chinese leadership. Comparatively, like there was that chart that we saw in the last talk that I've seen before, the skeptics and then the alarmed people, and what percentages of Americans fall into different groups. Like how does that stack up in China? Are Chinese people aware of climate change? Do they care about it? Are leaders concerned? Are normal people concerned? How does it compare to here?
Yeah, they really, what I was most impressed with about China is that the leaders understand the issue, I think, and they are not trying to deny it. They want to get the best advice they can get and understand the situation, and that's and what was really impressive, the person at this Beijing forum that spoke for the Chinese government showed that he went through sector by sector and gave what their plans were, and basically it was to, as soon as the technology is available for a reduced emission, they will adopt that as their requirement. And that's, so if you look at their vehicle emission standards, they're much stricter already. Now in the United States, we did everything. We went to court to sue the government and won the case, Vermont versus automakers and US government. But it took decades to get an improvement in the vehicle emissions standards. In China, they're going to do it immediately. When it's available, they tighten the standards. And then they show that within the next couple of decades or so, their emissions will start down. That's their plan. And that, I think, is a sensible approach. It's not a political issue there. You may not like their form of government, but it seems very, in terms of solving this problem, it allows them to move very quickly.
Dr. Pachauri of the IPCC had suggested several years ago that we need to decrease the total CO2 emissions by around 2015 if the Earth is going to avoid a major possibility of runaway climate change. Can you comment and expand on that?
Yeah, actually, when I first decided in 2004, 2005 to speak out publicly on this for the first time in decades, I gave this talk at AGU in 2005 in which I said that we had to get emissions to peak within 10 years, which would mean 2015, which is the same thing that Patchy mentioned. But you know, and with such a path, you can do something like what I showed on that graph. You can get CO2 to peak within a few decades and then start down. But if you want to get back to 350, which we didn't realize at that time was that stiff requirement, then you've got to do some extra things. You've also got to get the soil to sequester more CO2, and you've got to replant some forests and things. But the main thing is, we do need, within that sort of time frame, to stop this continual exponential growth. And there are still, the governments and the fossil fuel industry is just assuming there will be fuel. That was the title of this New York Times article a few days ago. They say, oh, there's more fuel. We go to these new techniques for fracturing shale to get more gas out, and we go to the deeper ocean, and we go to the Arctic, and we do all these things, and we will find more fuel. Well, that's conceivable. You can continue to squeeze more out. The oil wells presently are getting less than half of the oil out of their wells, so they'll figure out ways to squeeze more of that out. But that's going to have to be the last drop, which is a stupid policy. It just makes it more impossible to solve the climate problem. So that's why we need a carbon price. And by the way, that's what I find, it took a long time to sink into my thick head. I thought, when I first made these charts, I thought, well, this shows what the strategic approach should be. We should agree to phase out coal, and we should agree not to develop the tar sands. Well, but you just can't get, although that strategically is what is needed, it's not, how can you achieve it? You can't order these countries not to develop their resource. The only way you can solve it is with a price on carbon. The first things to fall will be mountaintop removal, tar sands, because those are very carbon intensive. And so as soon as we get any reasonable price on carbon, those things will begin to fall. And so it really is the one silver bullet is a price on carbon, a rising price.
One thing that we're expecting to happen, when we put a price on carbon, is that we're encouraging research and development on more renewable energy sources. So hypothetically, if there's a price on carbon that's put on today, how much time do you think it would take for a viable, cheap renewable energy to develop, and what kind of renewable energy do you think has the most potential?
The response is, if the public and the business community knows that price is going to continue to go up, then the response is actually quite quick. Contrary to the case when the gas price fluctuates at the pump. The public basically ignores this. There's a small effect, short-term effect, but they don't have confidence that the gas price is going to stay at $4 or $5 a gallon. But if they know it's going up, then the modeling that's been done by Charles Komanoff and others shows that just this rate that was proposed by John Larson, going up to equivalent of $1 a gallon after 10 years, already after 10 years, it reduced emissions 30%. But where will the main effect be? Well, the thing which is most effective quick is energy efficiency. where there's tremendous potential. There are things that actually make economic sense now, but people don't bother to do them. There's not big enough economic incentive. And then you let the other things compete with each other, including, in my opinion, we need an hour to talk about it, but I think you need to understand the relative merits of potential future generations of nuclear power, which already is our safest in large industry in the United States. The safety record, if you just look at it, is the best of any major industry in the United States. And there's potential to make it safer, and there's the potential to burn the nuclear waste. But that's a whole topic which I don't think I have time to get into.
Hello, Michael J., member of the Progressive Democrats of America. Thank you for everything, for these years of service, but also for being willing to be arrested and to consider suing the government. I'd love to hear more about that. When I have to speak to people that deny climate change, I find myself saying that you can't pick and choose science. You can't take all the fruits of science for your computer and GPS and the weapons that keep you safe and then reject this science as well as evolution, perhaps. And I wonder if you have considered or perhaps taken action on an idea to organize or suggest to other scientists, perhaps masses of scientists at NASA, for example, to take action on this in some mass protest, for them to write letters to Obama or even to walk out for a day. And forgive me if I'm not aware if you have done anything like that, but I wonder if there's anything possible. Thank you.
Well, I've asked some scientists to help me develop this case for suing the government. But what we really need is the large numbers. And that is why we need organization, and we're, as I say, we're amateurs who don't know how to do this. But there are some who are extremely good, like Bill McKibben's group, 350. That's why I really would like to see them, get behind, first of all, a fee and green check. Because, the environmental groups, and not just to pick on Bill's, but the bigger ones, would support anything that looked like it was going to do something, do however little. The cap and trade. Big mistake. You need to understand fundamentally what is needed and then stick to it. Make the message clear and stick to it. And we need to somehow, the message has to be simple enough that the public can understand it. When I was on David Letterman, he asked me, what does the public need to know? And I said they need to know the difference between cap and trade and fee and dividend. But he rolled his eyes, I couldn't continue that discussion. We've got to figure out how to say this in a way that people can, and we do have to get big groups, got to reach the young people, and we do need to get people in the streets and marching to Washington. But it's a tough job. I was trying to get to my webpage, I'm going the wrong way, I guess. Yeah. I'm going the wrong way. Well, anyway, another question?
Okay, well, this is a question to help me prepare my slides next time I stand up and proceed to present your work. I would like you to, I'm thinking of Einstein's prediction that the star would shift out of alignment if you looked at them during an eclipse, and how groundstanding that was for convincing other people that the theory of relativity was accurate. I wonder if you could name what were the most spectacular feats of prediction done by climate scientists, and if you could cite specific papers, especially papers that included confirmation by peer groups?
Well, from the standpoint of the physics of the problem, the critical thing, the smoking gun, which proves that we know what we're talking about and even have it quantitatively approximately right, is the planet's energy balance. That's why it's so important to make, it's been a very tough job to get the ocean temperature measurements accurate. They kept changing instruments, you know, you haven't got them calibrated well against each other. But finally, we're beginning to do that. And from the scientific point of view, that's what really nails the problem. If we had some big signals that the public would recognize, that makes it a lot easier to get action. But the problem is we can't. Things are happening, but yet, as I mentioned at the beginning, the climate change is smaller than short-term fluctuations, so you have to look at statistics. The big practical impact is on the hydrologic cycle. The fact that as we get more global warming, we'll get more extremes of both ends of that. More heavy rainfall and floods on the one end, but also stronger droughts and bigger fires on the other end because of the higher temperatures. And if you look at the statistics, most places have had, a lot of places have had 200 or 300 year floods in the last several decades. So, the rate of global warming, for example, that's consistent with what the models calculate. So there are a lot of things you can point to, and but when you get into these detailed arguments, the public can often not understand. There'll be people who question. There'll be 2 or 3% of the scientists who will be skeptical, and that makes it difficult because they're usually given equal time to the other 97%. That's why I say if we want to have a basis for action, the president could ask the National Academy of Sciences to give him a summary of what is the situation, because the situation is actually clear from a scientific perspective, but it's hard to make it clear to the public.
Dr. Hansen, thank you very, very, very much.